Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Our previews for 2022 continue. Today, Justin Walker joins us. We will preview the West Virginia Mountaineers coming up next.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here. Once again, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Joining us today, it is Justin Walker, the host of Couz's Corner. Does that on YouTube. Where else can people find you, Justin, before we get going here today?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter. Handles right below here at Couz206. I'm on Spotify, Apple Podcast, several different podcast platforms as well. I am on Instagram and TikTok as well. I don't use those a whole lot. I'm still trying to figure those out, to be honest. But
I'm with you. The TikTok thing it's not me. And also I got hacked on Instagram once, so I'm off there. Let's talk some West Virginia football. So the number one thing that I think people have kind of been going back and forth about this year is like really how hot is the seat for Neal Brown, because he's owed a lot of money. He signed an extension. What was it, after 2021, 2020? I forget which year it was.
2020.
But so he signs the extension. So he's owed a lot of money. And it's not like the performances have been horrible, but they're not really pushing those kind of upper bound limits at this point. So how hot is the seat for Neal Brown going into 2022?
Depends on who you ask. I think from the fan base perspective, it's really hot. But from the administration perspective, probably not so much because of what you said, the extension and the buyout he has, which is in excess of $20 million if they were to let him go. And a school like West Virginia doesn't have the financial wherewithal, I don't think, to pay a $20 million buyout for a coach.
So yeah, I mean, because I have heard variety of opinions on that. Where are you personally on kind of how hot the seat should be?
I think it should be hot. I mean, in year 4, now I'm not saying he has to go out and win 10 games, but in my opinion, if he doesn't win 8, 7 minimum, then we should probably go a different direction, because year 4, I don't think there's any more excuses. COVID is not an excuse anymore. Dana Holgerson's recruits, which there are still a few of those guys left on the roster, but the majority of the roster are his guys that he's brought in. So I think the excuses are over. It's time to start winning football games. He now has an offensive coordinator, so we can't blame him on that anymore. It's time to get it done on the football field.
He made some interesting comments about the change, the offensive coordinator. Obviously, they bring in Graham Harrell. And he talked about like personally what it's done for him, right? But he said, I've been able to be a better dad because he's not worried about all the stuff that goes with having to coach one side of the ball and also be the head coach. Your thoughts about kind of making that move? Do you think it shows desperation, maturity, a big mixture of both that he gives up the play calling and sees somebody else as an offensive minded coach? What are your thoughts on that change?
Yeah, I think maturity. I mean, you got to keep in mind, Neal Brown's only about 41 years old. I think he's the same age as I am, actually, which is very young to be a head football coach at the Power 5 level. And even though he was at Troy for 3 years, I think it's a whole different. The expectations are so different at a Power 5 school. There's more responsibilities. You have more, probably a lot more media responsibilities, more responsibilities when it comes to dealing with boosters and all this other stuff. So I think he probably figured he could do it with ease, like he did at Troy. I shouldn't say with ease, but do it successfully. And I just don't know that translated to a Power 5 level. So I do think it shows, he held himself accountable for not being able to get the job done offensively. And, there are some who think that Shane Lyons may have pushed him to do that. I don't know. But either way, I think it shows a sign of maturity that he was willing to do that and let go of and stop micromanaging so much, so to speak.
So the big change here everybody's excited about is JT Daniels. And this is a player that when he plays looks really good. The big question is, how often can you get him on the field? How often can you get him playing? Now, everything seems to be right now, right? He's healthy. It's all good to go. There's no concerns about anything as we head into no knee, no shoulder, no nothing as we head into this season, right?
Not that I know of. I think he's pretty much healthy for now. It'll, obviously to be determined. Can he stay that way? Fortunately, we have a experienced offensive line coming back, so hopefully they can keep him upright as much as possible, and so that he can show what he really can do when healthy.
And this was the move that kind of brought the most excitement, because the one interesting thing about the passing game for West Virginia was that, I mean, Jared Dagey was leading the league, and I think he actually ended up leading the league last year in passing yards, right? So but you never watched Jared Dagey and thought, that's a really good quarterback right there. I mean, he did not move around a whole lot. Pretty statuesque back there is the way I would describe him. Decision making was hit or miss sometimes, and it feels like, especially last year's receiving core, like that was actually a pretty decent receiving core that they had. And you pair that with Letty Brown, they really weren't able to cash in a whole lot on that. I mean, they made a lot of mistakes, and it was not just him, but just not able to cash in kind of as much as often as they should have, I think, offensively.
Right, and I think a lot of that, there's multiple reasons for that. I think the offensive line, though they're talented, were very young last year. We had a true freshman playing in there. We had our center who's very good and is on some preseason watch lists this year, Zach Frazier. But it was the first time he'd ever played center full time. So he didn't play it in high school or anywhere. So, and then you had Doug Nestor, the transfer guard from Virginia Tech last year, who played half the season with a cast on his hand. And I don't know how many people realize that. When he got that cast off his hand the second half of the season, he was a completely different player, and he actually graded out really high according to Pro Football Focus the second half of the season. So, and all those guys are back. Plus, we have our left guard James Gamitter back. Well, our right tackle position is probably going to be uh, the one to watch because there's a competition going on between last year's starter Brandon Yates and a guy named Jaquay Hubbard, who's really pushing here for that starting spot, and that could be our weakest spot on the line this year. But I do think those guys will push each other to get better. And then you add in the fact that according to Coach Brown, the stats, Daggy led in yards, but he also led in number of sacks taken. But he says you can't put all that on the offensive line because A, sometimes Daggy held on to the ball too long, and B, he said our running backs and tight ends missed a lot of blocking assignments last year. So, and according to him, they're correcting all that now in the offseason. So, hopefully, we see a different offense than what we saw last year.
The running back position is an interesting one for them this year. So they lose Letty Brown, who I thought did a phenomenal job. And then they brought in Lynn J. Dixon, and then he decides, he ends up transferring out. They do have some returning, talent off this team. But they still have Tony Mathis, who's kind of looks like he's gonna be the guy, right? I mean,
Yes.
what does that running back rotation look like for Mountaineers this year?
Yeah, right now Tony Mathis is the number one guy. He stepped up last year in the Kansas game. He played most of the second half just to give Letty a breather because Letty had been beat to death basically. And Mathis ran for now. I know it's against Kansas, but he still ran really well. Ran over 100 yards in that game. Then he played. Letty sat out the bowl game, so Tony was the guy. Obviously, our offense as a whole looked terrible, but Tony Mathis actually looked pretty good in that game. He ran for over 50 yards, I think it was, but didn't have a whole lot of carries. So, and looked pretty good while carrying the ball. So we just didn't have their defensive line just ate us up in that game. So we didn't have a lot of he didn't have a lot of hope. But he is going to be the guy. They say he's the hardest worker on the team. He's due. He's been sitting behind Letty Brown now for what I think 2 years, maybe 3. Uh, he's come in and he's at an ideal weight now that he's been trying to get at all off season. I think he's at 207, so he's in really good shape, and he just looks really good. And I think he's going to surprise some people this year. And then we've got Justin Johnson, a 4-star recruit in last year's class, who did see some action last year as a true freshman, who's been stepping up and looking really good and gaining confidence. And then we have another 4-star recruit behind him in Jalen Anderson, who right now isn't being mentioned a whole lot, but will be that third guy more than likely in that running back room.
Wide receiver is an interesting position for them too, because you lose Winston Wright. Wright goes to Florida State, which was a big loss. Bryce Ford Wheaton, is one of the better wide receivers in the league. He's probably a top 5, top 6 wide receiver in the Big 12. And also you still have Sam James there too. But there are. I mean, there's not a ton of depth at first look, right? I think that's the big question: is all right, who's actually going to be catching passes this year outside of those two guys? for the Mountaineers from JT Daniels.
Well, you mentioned Ford Wheaton and Sam James, but I think we'll also have Caden. We have Caden Prather back, who was a highly touted recruit coming in last year. Saw quite a bit of action late in the season. Showed some flashes. We think he could be a breakout star this year. We also have Reese Smith coming back, who was in the two deep last year as an inside receiver. You're right. We don't have the amount of depth we had, but Coach Brown, I think, did that on purpose. He said that we had too many wide receivers on the team, and he couldn't keep everybody happy. Essentially, there weren't enough touches to go around for everybody. So he thinks that having the number they have now will actually benefit more. You'll be able to get guys in more of a rhythm, and they won't have to, worry about losing. Hopefully, won't have to lose guys to the portal because we lost 3 receivers to the portal. Not only did we lose Winston Wright, we also lost 2 other guys, Isaiah Esdale and Sean Ryan, who both would have been fifth-year seniors. But we also have a couple young guys that they're expecting to show some nice things this year too. Cortez Braham being one of those. But I think he's going to step up and have a nice year too.
So, you switch over now on defense. I mean, this is a defense that has really lost a lot. It wasn't like the performance last year wasn't bad. I mean, they were 26th in finishing drives. They were 70th against explosive plays, so not great. 66th in efficiency, so they were kind of middle of the pack when it came to those things, and middle of the pack also in the Big 12. Scoring defense 45th in the country, rushing defense 42nd, passing 39th, overall total defense 37th. So, like middle class, upper middle class, but they only have 3 returning starters on this defense, 3 or 4 guys. I mean, this is kind of going to be a little bit of a project. Now, obviously, you got a guy like Dante Stills, and also you got Taj Olson up front too. So 2 guys, can anchor the line. I mean, and a good defensive line, good pass rush can really help things out there. Is that the key for them, getting after the quarterback to kind of maybe cover up some stuff that's happening in the back end?
Absolutely. And the reason that, and I think a lot of people may be sleeping on our defense. Yes, we only have 3 returning starters on paper, but we have 2 guys in Charles Woods at cornerback, who our defensive backs coach says is the best corner in the league and can cover anybody in the country. Was graded out very highly by Pro Football Focus last year. He was not a starter last year until the number 1 guy went down with an injury, and Woods came in and actually played a lot better than the guy he replaced. So I don't. We're definitely improving on that side of the field. Then on the other side, we've got 3. 2 are corners and 1 safety coming in, grad transfers, who the 3 of them combined have over 1,000 snaps between them. You have Rashad Ajayi from Colorado State, Wesley McCormick from James Madison, and then Jasir Cox from North Dakota State, who's probably going to play the spear safety position. So those guys are 5th-year seniors now, or 4th or 5th-year seniors. They're grad transfers, so they've got experience. Maybe not the Power 5 level, but they do have experience playing college football. So even though we had guys leave, they have been replaced by guys with experience. And according to our defensive staff and Coach Brown, they are bringing in guys with more speed and more length, so they will be able to play more man now, which will help that front 7 get more pressure on the quarterback. So, and don't forget, in the middle, we've got Lee Koba, who is nobody talks about. He's a JUCO transfer, but he and I didn't mean to cut you off, Josh, but he when you mention his name, our defensive coordinator Jordan Leslie's eyes light up, man. I mean, I think he's going to be a star. We're a lot more. Don't have as much experience this year, but we have a lot more athleticism, and I think that might help cover up some mistakes.
Let's talk about this schedule, because this schedule, man. I mean, I love it. It's fun. I'm glad they're playing as many Power 5 teams as they are, but it is a difficult schedule. The road games are at Pitt, at Virginia Tech, at Texas Tech, at Iowa State, at Oklahoma State. I mean, they're going to be underdogs in every single one of those games.
Yes.
And so you think about that. I mean, you think about, okay, they'll be dogs in those games. Baylor's at home, they'll be a dog. Oklahoma's at home, they'll be a dog. And depending on how good Kansas State is later in the season, I mean, if Kansas State plays up to the potential, I mean, they could be a dog in that game. I mean, this is a really hard schedule. And so I think there's a chance, Justin, that while West Virginia's team might be better than it was last season, I'm not sure the results are going to be much better in terms of wins and losses, just because this is a murderer's row, man. This is really difficult.
I agree with that, and that's the one thing. My mind's on the 7-8 win range is kind of where I think we'll land. But man, with that schedule, it's going to be hard because, like you said, I mean, Virginia Tech. I don't expect Virginia Tech to be that good this year, but it's a night game in Blacksburg, and we all know Enter Sandman starts pumping through the speakers. Everybody starts jumping. That is a hard place to play. We go to Pitt, which is a rival game, and Pitt's going to be good. As bad as that pains me to say, or as much as that pains me to say, Pitt's going to be a really good team, and it's going to be a tough one. I think we have a chance, but we have to bring our A game. And then, I mean, how many teams have to play their two? Number one, not many teams play two Power 5 teams out of conference, and to play them both on the road, man. I don't know who made our schedule, but
And their two biggest rivals, right?
yeah,
I mean, two of their biggest rivals.
the way the schedule lines up this year is brutal, and not to mention the Big 12 side of the schedule. The only thing that makes me feel better, we have Baylor at home at night, which is a good, might help because Baylor's probably going to be good again. We're going to have to win some games that we're not supposed to win. I mean, that's just what it comes down to because, like you said, we're not going to be favored in many.
The thing, basically, and you said 7-8 wins. I mean, it's going to have to go really right for that to happen. I think if this team kind of realizes its potential, and performs really well, I mean, it's going to be 8 wins just because Pitt's going to be good again. Although it sounds like Keaton Slovis could be injured. Not sure about how valid that is, but we'll see on that. You're right about Virginia Tech. West Virginia might have a better team. Play the game on a neutral field. Probably West Virginia's better, but that game could be close. We saw last year that was a crazy game. So there's a chance there. But yeah, getting Baylor at home is good. Getting Oklahoma home is good, and getting Kansas State at home too is they're really going to have to protect home field. I mean, they really are going to have to because those road games. I mean, are they going to win 2 road games this year? Like, can they do that? Because I mean, that's once again the road games at Pitt, at Tech, at Texas Tech, at Iowa State, and at Oklahoma State. And Iowa State's not great this year, but Jack Trice is always really hard to win at. Oh, yeah. So that's really difficult. You kind of wish you could flip some of these games, right? Let's just play at OU. Let's just play at Baylor and flip some of the worst teams to home, so we can kind of win those games. That makes sense.
That makes sense. And I think we can beat Virginia Tech, even though it's going to be a tough environment. I think we can beat Pitt. I'm not saying we will, but we can.
Yeah, you need to split out of those 2 games probably to get to 8 wins. You definitely have to split them.
And I think we can win. I think we can beat. We owe Texas Tech. Neal Brown has never beaten Texas Tech, believe it or not. So I think we're due that one. So I think we can win that one, and I think we can beat Iowa State, even though it's going to be tough. The good thing about it, they will be battle tested when it comes to playing in harsh environments. But that being said, to be objective, West Virginia, since Coach Brown has been here, has not done good on the road. Our road record is abysmal. So now they've held serve at home for the most part, but they're going to have to turn those road woes around this year if they want to get to that 7 or 8 win mark.
So what's your official prediction for West Virginia this year? What's your prediction for?
Well, it was 8-4, but after talking to you, Josh, I might lower it.
Well, it's just look, I'm not anti-West Virginia by any means.
I know you're not. No,
but it's just
I don't take it.
Damn, it's the hardest schedule in the league. It is the hardest schedule in the league. It's not close, I don't think. In my opinion.
Yeah. I still think we can go 8-4 because I think there's a few teams in the Big 12 that are going to take steps back this year. I don't think Oklahoma's going. I think this is the year we can finally get Oklahoma. We have them at home. They're going through a coaching change. I think Brent Venables is going to be a great coach. Don't get me wrong, but year one of a new coach, they could take a step back. I think Oklahoma might take a step or 2 back this year because they're replacing a lot of pieces on defense. So I think we could potentially get them. We do get Baylor at home, so that's our chance to pick them off. And Baylor hasn't won at West Virginia yet. Keep that in mind. They struggle in Morgantown. So I think we can win some games I think we're going to win some games that we're not picked to win. Now this is all relocated on JT Daniels staying healthy. By the way,
yeah,
if he doesn't stay healthy.
Are they going to? So would they go Garrett Green or did he transfer out?
He's still there.
He's still there. So, I mean, I know they brought in Nico Marchiol too, who people are really excited about. Garrett Green, though, would he be the backup if things go
Don't
south?
know. Probably so. I mean, right now, he's not even named JT the starter. They're all getting equal reps at practice.
Yeah, I mean,
But I think it's pretty much.
you hear him talk about it. It's JT's a starter when you hear him. You hear him speak about the team.
I think it's all just to keep the other guys happy. Number one, probably, and number two, to keep JT from getting overconfident. Maybe, I don't know, or just to get the backup more reps. So, in case he does have to play. But I think a lot of coaches are playing that strategy right now this time of year. Everybody's saying it's a race because they want to push they want them to push each other to get better. But I think Garrett Green. I tell you what, we have Will Goose Crowder, who nobody talks about a whole lot. He looked better. Of course, JT wasn't there for the spring game, but between him, Marchiol, and Green, Will Crowder actually looked the best of the three in the spring game. I know it's a spring game, but he does have a shot to win that backup position in my opinion. So to me, it's but to me though, if I had to pick today, I'd say it would be Garrett Green, basically because of his experience. He's the oldest guy of the three. So,
all right, Justin, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you and your work and all of its variety?
I'm mainly on YouTube at Couz's Corner, where I cover West Virginia football. I cover a lot of Big 12 football, and of course, any national storylines I'll cover. Do a lot of conference realignment stuff. You can also find me on podcast platforms: Spotify, Amazon, Apple. And then obviously at Twitter at Couz206. It's underneath me there on the screen. And you can also find me at Couz's Corner on Instagram and TikTok. So come check me out, interact with me. And I appreciate Josh having me on. I really enjoy his work over here at Locked On Big 12.
Appreciate that, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh.